everyone would please take their seats, including you, Michael Southview.
That's enough, Mocha. One moment.
Well, we're Americans, so we like to start on time. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honored guests. It's a beautiful day in Washington, and a good day to pause and reflect on the blessings of liberty and to honor those who were denied it by those who feared liberty. This is the 6th anniversary of the dedication of the Victims of Communism Memorial. And I am pleased to announce that we have achieved a new record in attendance. 18 foreign embassies are here with us this morning. From all over the world, from Eastern and Central Europe, from Central Asia, from the Baltics, from all over the world. Plus, there are more than 10 citizens groups representing those who still live, and not by their choice, under communism. I would now like to ask Father Arnie Panula, who is the director of the Catholic Information Service here in Washington, D.C., to give us an opening prayer. Father.
Heavenly Father, we bow our heads as we ask your grace upon us. We've come to gather here to celebrate the freedom with which we have been endowed in this country, a freedom which we do not take for granted by any means, and a freedom which could be extended to those of all of your children throughout the world. We pray especially that grace of yours upon those who do not live in freedom, those who at this moment are suffering under a communist oppression, who have had their freedom, their physical freedom, their spiritual freedom denied to them. We ask you, Heavenly Father, that through the work of this organization, the Victims of Communism Memorial, that attention be brought to those places in the world where the struggle for freedom continues. We ask you to help the directors of the Victims of Communism Memorial in their new effort to establish a museum to keep alive the memory of freedom and also the memory of those, the many millions of those who have died, who have given their lives, suffering precisely in the struggle for freedom. We ask this in your Son, our Lord. Amen.
Every year at this time, I'm privileged as chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation to give a brief status report on the work of the foundation. So 6 years ago, we dedicated this memorial, the only memorial in the world, to the more than 100 million victims of communism. Accepting the memorial on behalf of the American people, President George W. Bush said, "It's fitting that we gather to remember those who perished at communism's hands and to dedicate this memorial that will enshrine their suffering and sacrifice in the conscience of the world." Over the last 6 years, dozens of national leaders from around the world have visited the memorial to lay a wreath and to pay their respects to the victims of communism in their country, to honor heroes like Milada Horakova of the Czech Republic, Ramon Rodriguez of Cuba, Father Jerzy Populescu of Poland, Tran Van Ba of Vietnam, and Joseph Cardinal Mindszenty of Hungary. American ethnic communities have come here to say a prayer for those who died because they bravely resisted tyrants like Stalin, Mao, Castro, Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh, and Kim Il-sung. And if you had been here last week, you would have joined the candlelight vigil for the student victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre. This memorial has become what we hoped it would, a gathering place to remember and honor those who died under communism, and an international symbol of man's unquenchable thirst for freedom. Our online Global Museum on Communism, launched in 2009, continues to attract visitors, free and unfree, from around the world. It is the only museum on the internet that tells the story of communism from Marx to Mao and beyond. We have had nearly 173,000 unique visitors from 181 countries, including China, Vietnam, and yes, Cuba. We've now completed our latest educational project, a curriculum on communism for high school students. It's an interactive 9-lesson plan for teachers to help them instruct their pupils about the ideology, history, and legacy of communism. We will begin marketing the curriculum in print and electronic format to public, private, and home schools this fall. But that's not all. That's not all. From the beginning, our foundation has dreamed of a bricks and mortar museum on communism here in Washington, D.C. Many have applauded the idea, but no one stepped forward with the necessary seed money until now. I'm pleased to announce that the Republic of Hungary has made a $1 million donation.
Bravo!
A $1 million donation, enabling us to start planning an international museum on communism in Washington, D.C. And we are profoundly grateful to Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the government and the people of Hungary for their generosity and their faith in us. We will not let them down. And in the coming months, I'm pleased at that applause, in the coming months we will invite our other friends and supporters like you here this morning to join our international campaign to build that International Museum on Communism in this great capital city. You know, sometimes I'm asked, why do you bother? The Cold War's over. Communism's dead. But ask the political prisoners in China's Laogai whether communism is dead. Ask Cuba's ladies in white whether communism is dead. Ask the Christians and Buddhists of Vietnam who are not allowed to practice their faith whether communism is dead. And if communism is dead, why do so many college students here and abroad wear Che Guevara and hammer and sickle t-shirts? Our Jewish brothers and sisters understand full well what is at stake. They understand that history must not be forgotten, lest it be repeated. They keep reminding the world of the Holocaust, crying, "Never again." Even so, we cannot, we must not, we will not forget the victims of communism or their sacrifice for us. We will continue to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth, about Tiananmen Square, and the Gulag, and the Isle of Pines, and the killing fields of Cambodia, and the boat people of Vietnam and Cuba. Let us all here resolve that never again will we allow so evil a tyranny as communism to terrorize and subjugate the peoples and the nations of the world. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce three visiting parliamentarians from our good friends in the Baltic states. Andrunius Azubalis, who is Deputy Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Estonia. Marko Mikkelsen, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Estonian Parliament. And Ožars Kalnins, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee for the Latvian Parliament. Gentlemen, if you will please come to the podium and make some brief remarks.
Dear friends, if any man disowned his past, he would be commanded to wander in the dark. The same destiny awaits also peoples who escape historical memory or aim to erase the memory or what may seem inconvenient according to today's understanding of benefit or loss. In my continent, everybody is aware of the crimes to humanity by Nazism, but only part of Europe is aware of the crimes of communism. As for Lithuania and our neighboring Baltic states, we have direct experience and bitter taste of Stalinist regime. Therefore, for us, communism is not an exotic or fancy idea of equality and freedom as imagined by some young people in Western Europe on these days, but just a platform for occupation, oppression, and terror. For this reason, Lithuania, accompanied by other Central and Eastern European states previously occupied by Soviet Union, initiated international discussions on historic conscience and memory at the EU level, and consistently support collaboration of research centers, academic institutions, and NGOs in their fight with amnesia of the communist crimes. For these aims, we managed to establish a common EU platform of European memory and conscience in 2011. 1 year later, on September 19, 2012, the resolution expressing support for designation of August 23 as Black Ribbon Day to recognize the victims of Soviet communist and Nazi regime was submitted in the United States Congress. Dear friends, I would like to use this special opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to Congressman Daniel Lundgren and Congressman John Shimkus for this courageous and important initiative, and hope that this resolution, or ones like it, will find its way by being re-registered and voted for in the 113th Congress. Dear friends, standing here in front of this monument, together with honorable, like-minded people, I bow my head in front of all the victims of communism worldwide. And on behalf of my fellow colleagues from Nordic Baltic region, let me assure all those who are still fighting their battles against authoritarian regimes, we understand and support your case. Thank you.
Every Latvian family in the world was affected by the deportations that took place in several waves, starting in 1941. Some were the direct victims of those deportations. They were sent to Siberia, most of whom never lived to return. Another group were the relatives of those who were deported who somehow managed to survive, but continued to live with the scars and the legacy of those deportations. And there was another group of Latvians who somehow managed to escape to the West so they wouldn't be deported. I'm a product of that last group because my parents fled to the West after World War II. I was born in a displaced persons camp and eventually ended up here. And when I look at this monument, as much as I see it as a memorial to all those who died and who suffered, I also see it as a sign of hope. Because it was here in this country that the tens of thousands of Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians who managed to escape the terrorism of communism were able to try to rebuild the hope of reclaiming the independence of their countries. And thanks to the government of this country, that independence, that hope for independence was never abandoned. And thanks to the non-recognition policy of the United States of America, in 1991, when our people rose up again to reclaim that independence, we had a legal and a political basis to restore that independence. So that for me, this is a symbol of hope, not just for the rebirth of the 3 independent Baltic states, but I think it's a sign to all people who live under oppression, especially under communist oppression. But I think all oppression in the world is that you need support, you need allies, you need friends, but you have to believe in your people and you have to continue to fight in order to reclaim your lives and your right to exist on this planet. So I want to thank again everyone who supported us all those many years, 50 years, who never gave up hope. And I want to thank all those who are no longer with us, who were either sent to Siberia or who ended up here, never living to see the independence of Latvia restored again. I think they're with us now, and I think they will be with us in the generations to come. But we will never let this happen again. Thank you.
We all know that history is something what we cannot change. I studied history at the very historic moment for our nation. I went to the university in 1988 during Soviet Union times. We weren't sure how long Estonia will be under occupation, but we were sure that one day the freedom will be there again. And actually it came very quickly. In 1993, when I graduated university, I graduated already during free Estonia again. As a historian, and I said, like I said, we know that history is something that we cannot change. But we all know that history can be very powerful tool in the hands of those who try to manipulate of the minds of the people, of those minds who are not free and don't know what freedom means. I think so what our nations went through during the last 20, 30 years is extraordinary. And I think so this is what brings us together to commemorate these events, what actually something what we have to every day think about. Freedom, democracy is something what are very much valued among our nations, and we work daily to promote freedom and democracy where their people would like to be free and democratic, but they are not yet. So I think so these events like today here or somewhere else in the world are extremely important in a way because we know that crimes of communism are not yet fully understood, and those who committed those crimes are not punished. But I think the most important what we can do is commemorate, talk, and remember those victims who fell on the communist crimes. Once again, thank you for US government, Congress to organize this event as well here and participate. We very much acknowledge your support during times when we were not free, but we are today free and among those nations who can help others. Thank you.
Would like to also recognize that we have here with us the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committees of Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. It's now my pleasure to invite to the podium for some remarks a rising star of the U.S. Congress, Congressman Jim Bridenstine, from that wonderful, wonderful state, not of Arizona, though I am, but from Oklahoma, the heartland of America. The congressman is a Navy pilot, a combat veteran. After leaving active duty, became director of the Tulsa Air and Space Museum. So we're going to have to call upon you, Congressman, to help us with our museum. He was elected to Congress in 2012. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Bridenstine.
Well, I would just like to start by thanking Dr. Edwards for inviting me, and thank you for all the dignitaries that are here from foreign nations. It is a true honor to be here, and I congratulate the foundation on its 6th anniversary for the memorial's dedication. I've got a number of remarks here planned, but I'd just like to share you my experience with communism. I'm a Navy pilot. I've flown combat all over this world over many years now, and one of my first experiences was an exercise I did in South Korea. And during that exercise, I took a day off and I went up to Panmunjom where the armistice was signed between South Korea and North Korea in 1953. And I was at the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, looking across the border from a watchtower, and I had a Japanese soldier with me. The Japanese soldier spoke English, of course he spoke Japanese, and he spoke Korean very well. And he was interpreting a lot of what I was seeing. And one of the first things I noticed was a big city on the hill, a big city over the horizon there. And he was sharing with me that while the city looks beautiful from a distance, that inside this city, the buildings have no windows, the buildings have no floors, the buildings have no useful purpose whatsoever. The city was built as propaganda to encourage South Koreans to defect to North Korea. And this was an idea for a young lieutenant junior grade in the United States Navy. This was an idea that was completely foreign to me. The idea that you would build a fake city to try to encourage people to come to your country. The other thing that I saw and I heard, they had billboards. And the billboards said, "Come to North Korea, the land of opportunity." And at this time in North Korea, 5% of the population was starving to death every year. And they were saying, "Come to North Korea, the land of opportunity." The third thing I saw, or I actually heard from this watchtower, were loudspeakers coming from the north. And of course the Japanese soldier was interpreting for me, and he said that the loudspeakers say, "Come to North Korea, our generals are better than your generals." And in America, I heard chuckles here. In America, that sounds funny to us. That's something that, again, is foreign to a young lieutenant junior grade in the Navy who's never been to the Korean Peninsula before. But what was so unique and what really struck me is the fact that here in the United States of America, we don't fight for generals. We don't fight for autocrats. And we don't fight for men. We fight for institutions. We fight for the Constitution. We fight for the rule of law. We fight for our Bill of Rights. We fight for the right to assemble, like we're doing here today. We fight for the freedom of speech, the opportunity for me to come here and say what I've seen and what I've been a part of. The freedom of speech, the right to assemble, the protections for political opposition is something that we hold dear. And the right to freely worship is something that is unique. It's not as unique as it used to be, thanks in a large part because freedom-loving people have made the ultimate sacrifices required to extend freedom around the world. But these concepts were unique, and it's important to note that when I was in South Korea, I went to church and I worshiped freely because somebody from my country had gone to that country, and a lot of those people had made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave everything so that people in a foreign nation would have the opportunity to live free. And what I think is so important about this foundation, certainly we want to remember and commemorate the victims of communism, absolutely. But I think what's equally important is the fact that we have new generations that are coming up, and people have alluded to Che Guevara and other cultural phenomenon that are going on inside the United States regarding communism. It is up to us to stand firm and let people know just the atrocities, the economic atrocities, the human rights atrocities that are associated with communism. It is up to us as political leaders to make sure that these atrocities never come to countries that currently live free. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who really, without him, we wouldn't be here. Back in 1993, when there was a congressional resolution to approve a memorial to the victims of communism, one member stood up very, very firmly and strongly and said, yes, it must be done. And that individual was Congressman Dana Rohrabacher of California. He's continued to speak out for freedom and democracy all over the world. So please welcome an old and dear and good friend of ours, Congressman Dana Rohrabacher.
Yeah, this just about didn't happen. I can tell you that I remember when Lev Dobryansky brought this up originally, and it was going to be a real struggle, and we were going to have a memorial and even maybe have a museum to the victims of communism. And people started emerging all over this city to fight Lev Dobryansky to prevent him from doing that. We had some real stalwarts behind our effort, and we were just lucky we had people like Tom Lantos, who are another hero in this fight in the Cold War, who are with us. But it actually took us, we had to make a deal in order to get this statue and this memorial actually done. And it was that the administration was going to go to Russia. They needed a certain piece of legislation to be rushed through the Foreign Affairs Committee. In order to do that, they needed to have unanimous consent to waive the rules, to have the time to get the legislation through. And I just stepped forward and said, no, I'm going to object unless we get a Victims of Communism memorial. And that's how we got it. And so that's, sometimes it's not just the great proclamations of principle and those type of huge stands that are being made against some onslaught that change the day, but sometimes it's people who are able to maneuver through a bureaucratic maze. And I will tell you that Tom Lantos, during that time, he did that for so many people who are seeking their freedom, and And of course, Lev Dobryansky laid the intellectual foundation for what we're doing today. And then, of course, it took Lee Edwards, a hardened political activist who knew how to get things organized and get things done, before we actually were able to put the project and bring it to fruition. So today I'm here to thank all of those of you who were involved in this. And as we look at what this statue is and what this memorial is, it reminds us that the Cold War may be over, but the fight against communism goes on. We have, this was never, and I know I'm making a lot of people mad at me when I say this was never a fight against Russia. This was a fight against communism that captured Russia just like other captive nations. And it is up to us to try to work with the Russian people to try to defeat the remnants of communism that still threaten the world. And especially, I say that, especially when we see that this statue is resembles the statue that was in Tiananmen Square, where the freedom-loving people of China were slaughtered and were ultimately denied what the people of Russia got, which was the elimination of communism. Perhaps the greatest tragedy in my lifetime is that at Tiananmen Square, the United States did nothing to suggest to the Chinese leadership they weren't going to get away with this. I will tell you right now, this did not happen under Ronald Reagan's watch. Under Ronald Reagan's watch, communism was disintegrating because that was his #1 goal, was to defeat the Soviet Union. Again, not Russia, the Soviet Union. And when Reagan left office, and I'm very, very proud to have served as one of Reagan's speechwriters for 7 years of my life. That's probably the thing that I'm the proudest of in my entire life. But when Reagan left office, this Tiananmen Square was ready to happen, but Ronald Reagan was not president. And I've told this many times, I think if Ronald Reagan would have been president, we'd have had a different world today, and communism would not be the dominant force in China, and thus China would not be threatening the world peace. The fact is that when Tiananmen, and people say, what would Reagan have done? Would he have sent in the troops? No. What Ronald Reagan would have done is, when we knew that the troops were amassing to go into Tiananmen Square and slaughter the democracy movement, Ronald Reagan would have picked up the phone or sent a telegram saying, if you do this, no more economic investment in your country, no more transfer of technologies and capital, no more open market to your goods, the deal is off. That's what Reagan would have said. And they wouldn't have invaded. But what did, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say bad things about Republicans, but what did Ronald Reagan's Republican successor say? Nothing! He said nothing! And that was the greatest message of all, because they went into Tiananmen Square and they slaughtered the democracy movement, and you know what price they paid? Nothing! Of course the communists, if we would have had that policy during Ronald Reagan's era, the Soviet Union would still be alive and well and dominating all of Eastern Europe and still threatening the peace of the world. Thank God we had Ronald Reagan when we had him, and we're looking around for another one this next time out too. And finally, let me just note that today I see Ronald Reagan saw the Soviet Union as the greatest threat. That was his target. If we are going to succeed, we need to understand that today, radical Islam, which is at our throats, murdering our people, that and China have to be our #1 goals in to trying to defeat those forces on this planet. If we just saying we're going to be against everything that's bad isn't going to do it. We've got to make sure that we make the alliances and do what's necessary to defeat this dual threat to all of us and all of mankind. You know, we remember the people who fought today, victims of, and those who died. We remember the victims. We also remember those who struggled to make sure that the victimization of human beings ended. And there were many such people. I'm going to tell you one story, and then I'm going to get off of here because I know I'm tired of Dana Rohrabacher. But the fact is that when I was a young man, when I was a 9-year-old boy, I lived in Japan. My father was a Marine pilot. He flew spy missions along the China coast. We were in a little enclave outside a city at a little base called Iwakuni. And there was this little compound, and we were there with other families of people who were flying spy missions along the coast of Japan, of China. So we were a tight-knit group of families there, and right across the little dirt road from my family was another family, a pilot, who, when he was flying his missions, my dad wasn't flying, and I remember them very well because they had a little monkey, and their kids were my age. We used to play together. And then one day I came back, and the family was in tears. It was havoc and chaos. And I still remember this as a 9-year-old boy, because the father, the pilot, was shot down doing one of his missions near the Chinese coastline, and he was shot down. And of course, in the annals of military history, he is in the record as his plane crashed because of mechanical difficulties. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of Americans who lost their lives during the Cold War. We know about the ones who lost their lives overtly in Vietnam and Korea and elsewhere where we fought. We know that. But there were others, there's so many others that did the job that needed to be done and paid the price, and their names aren't even on the record now. We remember all of these people, and we know that as long as America is a force for freedom in the world, freedom, the people who love freedom have a chance against their tyrants. Let us recommit ourselves to what this is, and remember, until there is freedom in China, this lovely lady will remind us that the victims of communism will never be revenged until there is freedom in China. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now honored to have the former chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee of the U.S. Congress, Eliana Ross-Layton, born in Cuba, who understands so very well how important it is to keep raising a standard to encourage and to inspire the people of Cuba to realize that one day they will be free as well. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Eliana Ross-Layton.
Well, thank you very much. What great speeches my congressional colleagues have made. I am so pleased to be here at this important event. Good to see our ambassadors and our freedom fighters from around the world. This is indeed an important occasion. So many people devoted to freedom, devoted to democracy, and it was an honor for me to have received the Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom from this terrific organization a few years ago. And I want to thank the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for its incredible work, for its dedicated service to making this annual event possible. And I want to congratulate Dr. Yang Li for receiving this hard-earned and prestigious award. Just last week, as Dana pointed out, we remembered and commemorated the hundreds of brave Chinese students who were killed by the ruthless army on June 4th, 1989 at Tiananmen Square. So it is fitting that we honor Dr. Jian Li, a survivor of this brutal massacre. Well-deserved honor. And I also, along with my colleagues, I want to give a good shout out to my wonderful friend, Annette Lantos, who is such a freedom fighter, such a proud promoter of democracy around the world. I had the unique gift and pleasure and honor to serve as the ranking member as her husband, the late Tom Lantos, chaired a very bipartisan committee at that time, our Foreign Affairs Committee, and there was no greater voice for freedom, for democracy, and for anti-communism than the voice of Tom Lantos, and we miss him dearly, Annette, so I know that you do as well, but you're carrying on his mission. Let's give it up for Annette Lantos. As you heard, I'm a victim of communism myself, so I understand the horrors that this misguided ideology has brought to the 11 million people enslaved in my native homeland, and it continues to bring terrible outcomes to millions of people around the world. While some people demanding freedom were able to overcome communism in Germany and in Poland and so many previously enslaved lands, many regimes, such as the one in my native homeland of Cuba, in North Korea, in Vietnam, and China, continue to oppress their own people and violate